The white dog should have died before he ever reached the gate. By the time the Marines at the Adirondack mountain training outpost saw him, the storm had already swallowed the road, the tree line, and most of the world beyond the floodlights. Snow moved sideways across the dark like torn paper. It hissed against the chain-link fence, buried the tire tracks in the motor pool, and turned every breath into a pale cloud that vanished before it could rise. The temperature had dropped to 12 degrees, maybe lower with the wind cutting down from the ridgeline, and even the sentries had begun stamping their boots just to keep feeling in their toes. Then something pale shifted beyond the outer gate. At first, Lance Corporal Noah Hayes thought it was a loose tarp caught in the gusts. Then the shape lifted its head. Two amber eyes stared through the storm. A German shepherd stood there, white as the snow around him, except where ice clung to his chest and dark stains marked the fur near his paws. He was lean, broad-shouldered, built like a working dog, but exhaustion had bent him low. A torn strip of tactical webbing hung from his collar. His ears were upright, though one trembled with every blast of wind. He did not bark. He did not paw at the gate for shelter. He simply stood in the floodlight with snow gathering along his spine, looking past the Marines as if he had crossed miles of frozen dark for one reason and one reason only. Staff Sergeant Isaiah Brooks stepped out of the guard shack before anyone called for him. He was 37, tall, black, and steady in the way men become steady after life has taken enough from them. His camis were zipped beneath a field jacket, his gloves tucked tight, his face calm beneath the brim of his cover, but his eyes carried a winter older than this one. He had seen animals lost before. He had seen frightened dogs run toward warmth, food, human voices. This one did none of that. The K9 took one step backward into the snow, stopped, and looked directly at Isaiah. A gust struck the fence hard enough to rattle the metal. The dog did not flinch. "Open it," Isaiah said. Noah turned from the gate controls. "Staff Sergeant, command," said, "nobody leaves the perimeter until the storm breaks." Isaiah kept his eyes on the dog. "I said open it." The gate rolled aside with a frozen groan. The white shepherd crossed the line slowly, not like a stray entering safety, but like a messenger arriving late. His paws left small red marks in the packed snow. When he reached Isaiah, he lifted his nose and took in the Marine's scent, one careful breath, then another. For a moment the whole outpost seemed to fall silent beneath the storm. Trucks idled near the barracks. A generator coughed behind the med shed. Somewhere a loose cable tapped against a metal pole in a slow, lonely rhythm. Isaiah crouched, holding one gloved hand low. The dog stared at it, then past it, back toward the trees. His ribs moved fast beneath the wet white fur. He was freezing. He was hurt. But he refused to come farther in. Corporal Mason Reed jogged up from the comms tent, collar turned against the wind. He was younger, sharp-eyed, the kind of Marine who trusted orders because orders kept people alive. "Animal control is snowed in," Mason said. "We can kennel him in supply until morning." The shepherd answered by turning away from the warmth of the compound. He walked 10 feet toward the open road, stopped, and looked back. Isaiah felt something tighten beneath his ribs. Not fear. Recognition. The dog's movements were too controlled for panic. His path was deliberate. He did not wander. He checked wind direction. He avoided a patch of drift where the snow had crusted thin over the drainage ditch. Then he looked back again, impatient now, eyes bright through the whiteout. "He's not trying to get in," Isaiah said softly. Mason frowned. "Then what's he doing?" Isaiah rose, and the storm threw snow across his shoulders like ash. For 3 years he had hated nights like this. Hated the way snow stole sound. Hated the way radio static could become the last voice of a friend. Somewhere in the back of his mind, beneath layers of duty and silence, a memory stirred. Sergeant Caleb Warren on a broken transmission. Wind screaming through the speakers. A voice fading under static. "If something white comes through the storm, trust it." Isaiah had buried that sentence with the man who said it, or thought he had. The shepherd took another step toward the dark road. His legs shook. Still he waited. Not for comfort. Not for food. For them. Isaiah turned toward the gear rack beside the guard shack. "Get the med pack, 2 thermal blankets, a rope line, flares, and the folding litter." Mason stared at him as if he had misheard. "Staff Sergeant, visibility is maybe 20 yards. Then we'll stay closer than 20. Noah swallowed, glancing at the white dog. "You think somebody's out there?" Isaiah pulled on his outer gloves, slow and sure, though his heart had begun to beat with a rhythm he had not felt in years. The K9 lowered his head into the wind, bracing himself, ready to move the instant they followed. Isaiah looked at the blood in the snow, at the torn collar, at the impossible determination in those amber eyes. "I think he already found them," he said. "And I think he came back for help." The dog turned into the storm, limping but unbroken, and Isaiah Brooks followed him beyond the gate, into the white dark where the road had disappeared and something still alive was waiting beneath the snow. The wind bit harder as Isaiah Brooks and his small team followed Atlas into the whiteness, each step through the deep snow sending a small cloud of icy particles swirling into the air. The path was nearly invisible beneath the drifts, only the faint movement of Atlas's white coat offering a guide, a rhythm that pulled them forward with purpose. Every few feet the dog paused, head low, nose twitching, scanning beneath layers of snow and ice as if listening for a signal too faint for human ears. Isaiah's boots sank into the powder with each step, sending a shiver through his legs, but he kept his gaze fixed on the K9. Mason Reed, carrying the litters and emergency blankets, muttered under his breath about the cold and the gusts, yet even he could not deny the quiet urgency in the dog's movements. The forest around them was a wall of gray, snow-laden pines bending under the weight of the storm, branches occasionally snapping and dropping powder like a whispered alarm. Atlas led them through a narrow corridor between two ridges where the wind funneled down in sharp, twisting currents, the snow swirling around them like a living curtain. The Marines had to lean into the gusts to maintain their footing. Isaiah's eyes caught the subtle signs, the bent saplings, the shallow indentations in the drifts, the spots where the snow had been disturbed as if by pause or wind, and he realized that every action Atlas took was deliberate, a map drawn in motion, guiding them to something unseen. For a moment, the silence between the howls of the storm seemed heavy with possibility, with the weight of what lay ahead. Atlas stopped suddenly at a depression where the snow had formed a natural bowl. He sniffed low to the ground, his breaths coming in quiet, sharp bursts that mingled with the wind. Isaiah crouched low, signaling the team to stay alert. Mason placed a hand on Isaiah's shoulder, then gestured toward the faint outline of what could be a vehicle buried beneath the snow. Isaiah moved closer, kneeling slightly to gauge the depth and stability of the drift. The dog pressed against Isaiah's leg, nudging him forward with quiet insistence. Noah Hayes set down the rope line and blankets, adjusting his hood against the wind. Together they began to probe the area, moving snow aside carefully, making sure each step would not collapse the fragile covering. The storm continued to whip around them, but a narrow silence seemed to cling to the immediate area where Atlas worked, his amber eyes focused, unflinching, unyielding. Isaiah reached for his flashlight, sweeping it across the depression, revealing hints of color beneath the frost and white powder. At the edge of the snow, the faint outline of a red cross emerged, pressed against metal and glass, dulled by ice and storm. Atlas's tail lifted slightly, signaling a sign of progress, a small acknowledgement that they were on the right path. The Marine's breath came in clouds, each exhale sharp and immediate, mingling with the hiss of the wind. Isaiah's mind tracked the logistics of extraction, noting where each blanket and the litter would be positioned once the buried shelter or vehicle could be reached. Every movement was deliberate. Mason crouched, brushing away the heavy snow, revealing the contours of the roof and the frame beneath. The air smelled faintly of pine resin mixed with cold metal and the tang of snow packed hard. Atlas crouched low, ready to move at the slightest shift in the snow or signal from the team, maintaining vigilance for a sound that might indicate life within. Isaiah spoke softly, "Keep steady," his voice almost drowned by the wind. Mason nodded, adjusting his hold on the blankets. The dog's ears twitched toward a faint, almost imperceptible noise, a whimper carried on the wind. The team froze, listening. It was real. It was alive. Isaiah felt a pulse of hope, a surge of energy he had not felt since the last mission ended in loss. Atlas pressed his side against Isaiah's leg and gave a low, encouraging whine. Noah adjusted the flashlight, catching movement beneath the frost, a small hand curling through the blankets inside a cavity the snow had almost entirely concealed. Emily Carter moved forward with gentle precision, preparing to remove the debris without jostling the fragile form within. Atlas stood at the ready, eyes tracking every micro-movement, aware that the success of this rescue depended on timing, focus, and trust. Isaiah felt a quiet reverence settle over the team. The storm raged around them, but here, at this small opening, the world had shrunk to the rhythm of Atlas's breathing, the soft whimpers within the snow, and the deliberate, measured motions of the Marines working in unison. It was a dance of survival, a choreography written in instinct, courage, and faith, where each breath could tip the balance. Isaiah reached down to steady Atlas as the dog nudged forward again, guiding them closer to the opening that promised warmth, safety, and life. The snow had built walls around them, trapping the storm in an enclosed world, yet it could not hide the fragile heartbeat that lay beneath, waiting to be found. With careful hands and eyes wide with alertness, the Marines continued to move the snow, Atlas leaning close, signaling, insisting, urging them on. The storm howled, the cold penetrated, but the presence of Atlas, steady and unyielding, became a lodestar, a guide through the frozen expanse, a promise that they were not alone, and that something precious lay just beyond the snow and ice, waiting to be reached. Isaiah Brooks crouched low as he and the team cleared the final layer of snow, revealing more of the buried vehicle, the edges frosted over with ice, the windows streaked with condensation that swirled faintly as each breath escaped into the cold air. Atlas moved carefully around the perimeter, ears pricked, tail low but firm, guiding them as if he could see through the storm into the hidden space within. The wind pushed at Isaiah's jacket, cold and persistent, and every step required concentration to avoid slipping on the packed snow and ice. Mason Reed adjusted the rope line, holding it taut to prevent anyone from losing balance, while Emily Carter checked the blankets and med kit, preparing for whatever they would find inside. The first glimmer of color beneath the snow caught Isaiah's eye, a faint red, almost muted by frost, peeked from under the snow crust, a signal that life was near. Atlas lowered his head and pawed at the snow, digging with careful precision, his amber eyes locked on Isaiah's, silent in their communication, conveying urgency and hope at once. Isaiah brushed snow from his gloves and whispered, "Almost there, keep steady." And the team responded with slow, deliberate movements, each shovelful of snow revealing the contours of the roof and the frame of the vehicle below. Through the storm, the faint, irregular sound of breathing reached them, carried by the gusts, almost lost but enough to guide the rescue. Isaiah leaned closer, shining the flashlight through a small opening and catching a brief glimpse of movement, the outline of a small form pressed under blankets, a hand curled inwards, fragile and still. Atlas pressed gently against Isaiah's leg, his body a living anchor in the storm, encouraging calm, commanding focus. Mason knelt beside Isaiah, voice low. "That is a small one. Is that a child?" Isaiah did not answer, eyes fixed on the movement, heart thrumming with the possibility of life, recalling every lesson of patience and care, the slow measured actions that made rescues possible. Emily Carter began removing the icy crust from the blankets, revealing the pale, shivering form of a young girl, her eyes fluttering in the dim light, each breath shallow but steady. Atlas circled, maintaining a vigilant watch, occasionally stepping forward to nudge the blankets gently, checking that nothing obstructed her breathing, his paws leaving clean impressions in the snow. Isaiah held the flashlight closer, tracing the edges of the form, and saw Rachel Harper, her face pale, her breathing irregular, laying beside the girl, arms curled protectively around her. He felt the weight of the moment, the fine balance between life and the storm, the fragility that each breath held, and the urgency to act decisively yet carefully. Atlas whined softly, a sound that carried more than worry, more than alertness. It was insistence, guidance, and reassurance, all in one. Isaiah looked at the dog and nodded, signaling the team to proceed with caution, shifting the blankets to free a small gap and creating a path for Rachel and the girl to be lifted safely onto the litter. Mason and Emily moved with precision, coordinating their actions in silence, mindful of every shift, every ounce of pressure, knowing the slightest misstep could cause unnecessary strain. The wind picked up again, gusts driving fine ice crystals into faces, and Isaiah adjusted the angle of the flashlight, illuminating the snow edges, the fragile roof of the vehicle, the faces within. Atlas pawed again, a reminder that their time was short, that every second counted, and that trust must be absolute. Isaiah whispered under his breath, a prayer and a command intertwined. "Do not fail us, boy." Atlas responded by moving in close, head low, eyes steady, body aligned with the efforts of the team, as if merging instinct with intention. The small hand of the girl twitched, fingers curling slightly, and Emily Carter caught it in her gloved hand, feeling the pulse, the fragile warmth returning slowly to her skin. Isaiah exhaled slowly, letting himself focus on the rhythm of Atlas's movement, the controlled breathing of his team, the whispered reassurances in their eyes, all converging on this single, critical moment where preparation, instinct, and determination met chance. The storm raged on around them, white sheets of snow blurring the edges of visibility, but within that space, there was a narrow bubble of purpose, of hope held tightly in hands, in paws, in hearts aligned. Atlas stepped back momentarily, observing, ears twitching, ready to intervene with gentle insistence if necessary, the weight of responsibility resting on his lean shoulders, amber eyes reflecting both the storm and the life he had led them to. Isaiah adjusted his gloves, feeling the cold through the layers, and moved forward, coordinating the lifting of Rachel and the girl together, Atlas following each movement, ensuring stability and safety. Each motion was deliberate, slow, careful, a choreography dictated by urgency, yet tempered by measured patience, the kind that only comes with experience, and the trust built between humans and a dog who understands life is fragile and must be guided with respect. Snow continued to whip past, the sound a constant roar, but inside the circle of light and focus, the team moved as one, following Atlas, who had navigated the white maze with certainty, guiding them step by step toward warmth, toward safety, toward life. The rescue began to change shape the moment Isaiah Brooks reached deeper into the buried ambulance, and his flashlight caught the sleeve of an old Marine field jacket tucked around Lily Harper like a shield against the cold. At first, he saw only olive fabric, frost along the seams, a patch faded by age, and the careful way it had been wrapped around the little girl's shoulders. Then the beam shifted, and something on the cuff made his breath catch. A thin paracord bracelet, woven in dark blue and black, rested against the frozen blanket beside Rachel Harper's hand. For a second the storm outside seemed to pull away from him. The wind still roared. Mason Reed still called for more line. Emily Carter still worked beside the litter with steady hands. Atlas still stood near Isaiah's knee, trembling but alert. Yet Isaiah heard none of it clearly. He saw the bracelet, and the white world narrowed to one memory: Sergeant Caleb Warren sitting on an ammo crate 3 winters ago, laughing softly as he tied that same pattern around his wrist and said every knot was a promise to make it home. Isaiah did not reach for it right away. Some truths ask permission before they enter a man's heart. He only stared, his gloved hand suspended in the cold air, while Atlas stepped closer and gave a low, quiet whine. The sound pulled Isaiah back. "Staff Sergeant," Mason called, voice strained against the storm. "We need to move them now." Isaiah nodded, but his eyes stayed on the jacket. The name tape was partly hidden beneath ice. He brushed it with 2 fingers, gently, as if touching the face of a sleeping friend. Snow dust broke away. One letter appeared. Then another. Warren. Isaiah closed his eyes for half a breath. Not long enough for anyone to notice unless they knew grief. Atlas knew. The K9 pressed his shoulder against Isaiah's leg, not asking, not explaining, just standing there with the quiet weight of a witness. Isaiah had spent 3 years believing Caleb vanished into that mountain with nothing left behind but static and regret. He had replayed the final transmission so many times that certain words had become part of his bones. If something white comes through the storm, trust it. Back then, everyone said Caleb was confused from the cold, that his last words were fragments, sounds broken by wind and fading signal. Isaiah had nodded because Marines learned to accept reports, even when their hearts reject them. But now a white German shepherd stood beside him, half frozen and still refusing to rest. And Caleb's jacket was wrapped around a child who was breathing because somebody had kept her warm long enough for help to arrive. Emily eased Lily onto the folding litter, covering her with a thermal blanket that flashed silver beneath the beam of Noah's light. Rachel stirred as Mason and Isaiah prepared the second litter, her eyelids fluttering, her lips pale from the cold. She tried to speak, but only a faint breath came out. Emily leaned close. "Save your strength, ma'am. You are safe now." Rachel's eyes moved past Emily, past Mason, and stopped on Atlas. Something like recognition softened her face. Her fingers lifted an inch, weak but certain, reaching toward the dog. Atlas lowered his head to her hand. She touched the frost in his fur and whispered, barely louder than the snow brushing metal. "He came back." Isaiah leaned in, careful not to crowd her. "Ma'am, who came back?" Rachel swallowed, fighting for the words. "The Marine." He opened air for Lily, gave her his coat, told the dog, "Find them." Her voice faded, then returned in pieces. He called him Atlas. The name struck the space between them with the force of a bell no one else could hear. Atlas. Isaiah looked down at the white shepherd. The torn tag at his collar shifted in the wind, still crusted with ice, still hiding most of its letters. Atlas lifted his eyes to Isaiah, and in that gaze there was no mystery, only duty carried too far through impossible cold. Mason, who had not known Caleb, still went quiet. Noah stopped moving for a second, his young face pale beneath the red glow of his headlamp. Even the storm seemed to hold its breath around them. Isaiah wanted to ask Rachel where Caleb was, how long he had lasted, whether he had known rescue was coming, whether he had spoken Isaiah's name. But the questions would have to wait. The living came first. Caleb would have said the same thing. Isaiah stood, shoulders squared against the wind. "We are moving now," he said. "Mason, you take Rachel with Noah. Emily stays on Lily. I will lead with Atlas." Mason looked toward the wideout beyond the ambulance. "Can he make it back?" Atlas answered before Isaiah could. The dog stepped into the snow, limped once, then turned his body toward the hidden path, head low, eyes burning with purpose. Isaiah looked at the red marks in the snow behind him, at the child wrapped in silver, at Rachel fighting to stay awake, and at the name Warren fading again beneath gathering frost. He reached down and touched Atlas between the ears. "All right, boy," he whispered. "One more time." Atlas moved forward into the storm, and the Marines followed, carrying two fragile lives through the darkness, while a promise older than the blizzard led them home. The return through the storm was slower than the journey out, because now every step carried a life. Isaiah Brooks moved at the front with Atlas, one hand on the rope line, the other holding a flashlight low against the snow. Behind him, Mason Reed and Noah Hayes guided Rachel Harper on the first litter, their boots sliding and catching, shoulders hunched beneath the weight and the wind. Emily Carter stayed beside Lily, one gloved hand near the little girl's face, watching each shallow breath mist against the thermal blanket. The storm had thickened until the world seemed no wider than the circle of light around them. Trees appeared only when they were close enough to touch, black trunks rising from white drifts like old sentries. The cold found every gap in their collars, every seam in their gloves, every place where courage met skin. Atlas walked ahead, but not too far. He kept checking back, his white coat almost invisible except for the dark strip of torn webbing at his neck and the amber glow of his eyes whenever the flashlight caught them. He limped more now. Each time his front paw touched down, his body dipped slightly, but he never stopped for himself. He stopped only when the snow changed, when the ground softened, when the wind shifted in a way that warned him of danger buried beneath the surface. Twice he led them around shallow ravines hidden beneath fresh powder. Once he froze in the middle of the trail, body rigid, and refused to move until Isaiah redirected the team 10 yards to the left. A moment later, a heavy sheet of snow slid from a pine limb and collapsed exactly where Mason would have stepped. Mason stared at the place, breathing hard, then looked at Atlas. "I owe you one, boy," he said, voice rough from cold. Atlas did not turn for praise. He pushed forward. Isaiah understood that kind of heart. Some souls did not know how to accept gratitude until the mission was over. The rope between them tightened and slackened with each careful movement. Emily kept speaking softly to Lily, not loud enough for the storm to steal, just enough for the child to have a voice to follow. Stay with us, sweetheart. You are doing good. You are almost warm. Lily's eyes remained closed, but her fingers twitched once beneath the silver blanket. Isaiah saw it and held on to that tiny motion like a candle in a dark chapel. Rachel stirred on the other litter, her voice thin and distant. Lily. Mason leaned close while keeping his grip. She is with us, ma'am. Corpseman has her. Just keep breathing. Rachel's eyes searched the white blur until she found Atlas ahead of them. He would not leave, she whispered. The Marine told him to go, but he kept coming back to the window. Isaiah heard the words over his shoulder, and they settled deep. Caleb had always been that way too. Give him an order to save himself, and he would find a way to turn it into saving someone else. The memory warmed Isaiah for half a second, then hurt twice as much. He pictured Caleb in that buried ambulance, using his own jacket to wrap Lily, opening a small passage for air, placing his last hope in the dog he had saved months earlier. Not a miracle in thunder, not a rescue wrapped in glory, just a man in the cold, trusting a wounded animal to carry a promise farther than his own body could. The trail dipped toward a frozen creek bed, and Atlas slowed. The creek was hidden beneath snow, only a faint curve in the land showing where water had once moved under ice. Isaiah raised a fist, and the line stopped behind him. We cross one at a time, he called back. Slow. No sudden wait. Atlas stepped onto the narrow crossing first, nose low, testing. The ice made a soft ticking sound beneath the packed snow. Isaiah followed, shifting his weight carefully, guiding the rope. Mason and Noah came next with Rachel, then Emily with Lily. Halfway across, Lily's breathing changed. It became too quiet. Emily stopped so abruptly the rope pulled against Isaiah's harness. Hold, she said, and there was something in her voice that turned the cold sharper. Isaiah looked back. Emily bent over the little girl, pulling the blanket closer, checking her pulse with 2 fingers against the small neck. Mason lowered Rachel's litter gently into the snow. Noah turned his body to block the wind. Isaiah stepped back, but Atlas moved faster. The dog slipped around him, limping to Lily's side, and lowered himself beside the litter as though his warmth, thin as it was, could bargain with the storm. Emily worked with steady hands, calm but urgent, whispering Lily's name. Come on, sweetheart. Breathe for me. Rachel tried to rise, but Mason held her gently. Please, Rachel whispered, and the word broke into the wind like a prayer. Isaiah stood over them with the flashlight trembling in his hand for the first time that night. He had not prayed since Caleb vanished. He had spoken at memorials, bowed his head when others asked, stood straight in chapels with stained glass and flags. But he had never asked heaven for anything again. Not after the static. Not after the silence. Now he looked at Lily, at Emily's hands, at Rachel's tears freezing on her cheeks, at Atlas pressing his head against the child's covered chest, and something in him cracked open without permission. God, Isaiah whispered, so softly only the snow could hear it. Not after all this. Please, not after he brought us this far. The storm roared over them. No one moved. Atlas let out a sound then, low and broken, not a bark, not a whine, but something almost like grief refusing to surrender. Lily's fingers curled against the edge of the blanket. Then she coughed once, small and fragile, and drew in a thin breath. Emily closed her eyes for 1 second, then nodded. She is back, she said. Mason looked away, wiping his face with his sleeve before the cold could claim what had fallen there. Isaiah lowered his head, his breath shaking in the beam of light. Atlas stayed beside Lily for another moment, eyes half closed, as if lending her the rhythm of his own tired heart. Then, with effort, the white K9 rose again. He faced the hidden trail home, legs trembling, body worn down by cold and duty. Isaiah stepped beside him and touched the torn collar. You are not carrying this alone anymore, he said. Atlas looked up at him once, then turned into the snow, leading them onward while the first faint glow of the outpost lights began to tremble somewhere beyond the trees. The team moved carefully through the final stretch of the mountain trail, snow crunching under heavy boots and the storm continuing to whip around them like a living wall. Atlas led the way, limping but determined, scanning the terrain ahead for any hazard hidden beneath the drifting powder. Isaiah Brooks followed close, flashlight angled to catch every subtle depression or slick patch, hand brushing against the dog's white fur, offering silent reassurance. Mason Reed carried Rachel with care, her eyelids fluttering weakly with each gust, while Noah Hayes steadied the litter under the bright silver thermal covering. Emily Carter stayed close to Lily, speaking softly and steadily, her gloved hands maintaining warmth and monitoring the child's fragile breathing. The air was sharp with the scent of snow, pine, and faint traces of metal from their gear, each inhalation a reminder of the height, the cold, and the delicate balance of survival. The trail narrowed between two heavily laden pines, their branches sagging under snow that fell in intermittent sheets, the white veil masking small ridges and dips that could have tripped any of them. Atlas paused mid-step, ears flicking, body rigid, as if signaling caution. Isaiah nodded, feeling the trust that had built in these past hours, and slowed the team to a deliberate crawl. Every step was measured, every shift and weight considered. Mason adjusted Rachel's position, keeping her secure while Emily did the same with Lily, the children muffled in layers of blankets that reflected the dim flashlight beams like small lanterns. The wind tried to steal their balance, forcing Isaiah to anchor himself against Atlas and the rope line connecting the team, moving as one unit. Shadows of blackened branches danced against the snow like phantom fingers, and for a moment, it was easy to forget where the trail ended and the wild began. Atlas led them to a slight incline that dipped toward the ridge, a place where the snow seemed to have been sculpted by wind into a natural corridor. The dog tested the path, placing one paw forward, pressing, waiting, then moving ahead with cautious confidence. Isaiah followed, heart steadying with each careful footfall, watching Atlas's muscles tense and relax in perfect rhythm with the trail. Mason and Noah mirrored the pace, Emily keeping Lily close, her voice a constant thread of gentle encouragement. Isaiah noticed the faint imprint of paw prints and snowshoe tracks from earlier travelers, but they were nearly obliterated by fresh snow. Atlas did not follow those marks. He carved a path only he could see, only he could trust. The team passed a small outcropping of rock, partially hidden beneath ice, and Atlas stopped again, ears forward, eyes scanning. Isaiah raised his flashlight, the beam cutting a narrow tunnel through the storm, revealing the faint glimmer of light from the outpost ahead, faint but undeniable. Mason breathed a low sigh of relief, and even the storm seemed to soften for a fraction as the light became more defined, warming the horizon with promise. Emily checked Lily's pulse, steady but slow, and whispered reassurances that mingled with the howling wind. Rachel stirred again, weakly reaching a hand toward Atlas, who lowered his head to nudge her gently, his body a warm presence amid the cold chaos. Isaiah kept his eyes on the dog, recognizing the determination in Atlas's stance, the absolute focus on the path forward, and the unspoken understanding that every life in their charge depended on his vigilance. Step by step, footfall by footfall, the team moved closer to safety, guided by Atlas's knowledge, instinct, and unwavering resolve. The snow beneath their boots began to reflect more of the distant lights, creating long shadows that stretched behind them like quiet witnesses to the rescue. Isaiah's breath rose in visible clouds, rhythm syncing with the soft whine of Atlas, the creak of rope, and the muted shuffle of the team navigating the white expanse. Each yard gained felt monumental, each measured step a promise kept. The children's breaths, shallow yet present, guided every decision, every movement, every careful adjustment of hands, feet, and gear. Atlas pressed on, pausing only to check back, his amber eyes reflecting both the storm and the determination to lead his humans home. Isaiah whispered to the dog, "Almost there, boy. Just a little further." The sound was swallowed by wind but felt in the bones of everyone present, a mantra and a reminder that survival, trust, and quiet courage were intertwined in each step. The outpost lights grew brighter, colors softened by falling snow, and a faint warmth of familiarity began to bleed through the cold, reinforcing hope, signaling the journey's end was near. Atlas led the final stretch, limping yet steadfast, into the circle of light, and Isaiah, following close, felt the weight of relief, the rhythm of a miracle realized, and the silent promise that each life they carried had been guided safely by four paws through the storm. The outpost lights washed the falling snow in a soft, almost golden hue, reflecting off the thick layers that had coated the team during their trek, and for the first time that night, the wind seemed to subside enough for them to hear the faint crunch of their boots against packed paths leading to the shelter. Isaiah Brooks paused at the edge of the compound, taking in the sight of Atlas ahead, limping slightly, but still holding a steady line of movement, guiding them toward warmth and safety. Mason Reed followed with Rachel in his arms, her breathing more steady, yet fragile, while Noah Hayes helped stabilize the litter beneath Lily, her eyes still closed, but showing signs of gradual recovery under Emily Carter's watchful care. Atlas sniffed the air, pausing to listen, ears flicking as if interpreting signals invisible to human senses, then nudged Isaiah forward, urging him to continue. The path toward the temporary medical station wound through shallow drifts and icy steps that had to be navigated with deliberate care, every footprint leaving a clear imprint in the crisp snow, a record of progress. Isaiah held the flashlight higher now, scanning the area for obstacles, while Atlas pressed slightly ahead, guiding them with patience that carried more authority than any voice. The sound of the generator from the shelter reached them, a low hum beneath the howl of wind, promising warmth and human presence. Emily adjusted Lily's position on the litter, ensuring her chest rose and fell evenly with each breath, while whispering words of calm and encouragement that mingled with the storm, subtle yet persistent. Mason set Rachel down gently at the edge of the lit path, letting her absorb some of the warmth radiating from the compound lights, and she reached forward to touch Atlas, her fingers brushing the thick white fur, offering gratitude without words. Isaiah followed, placing a hand briefly on the dog's neck, feeling the warmth through the frost and understanding, in that small connection, the trust that had carried them through the blizzard. The path opened into a cleared area where medics waited, stretchers and thermal blankets arranged in readiness, lights casting sharp, elongated shadows against snowdrifts. Atlas led the way directly to Lily's position, pausing to allow Emily to lower the child gently onto a prepared litter, checking her movements with precise, almost human care, ensuring nothing was disturbed. Isaiah directed Mason to place Rachel on another nearby stretcher, guiding them through the process with calm commands and soft encouragement, each step executed in measured rhythm to avoid unnecessary movement that could disrupt the fragile equilibrium of life in the cold. The storm, though still present, seemed contained in the outer edges, the compound lights creating a bubble of calm, a place where the team could finally exhale collectively without the immediate threat of snow or ice compromising their footing. Atlas stood beside Isaiah, coat flecked with ice, breathing labored but steady, eyes flicking between the two lives entrusted to them, and the team working carefully to stabilize them. Isaiah took a step forward, brushing snow from his gloves, adjusting his flashlight to illuminate the faces of Rachel and Lily, both beginning to show subtle signs of warmth returning to their cheeks. Emily Carter checked vital signs, nodding faintly, her expression calm but intense, understanding the delicate timing of each action in the seconds it took for the children to regain strength. Mason Reed, standing close to Isaiah, allowed himself a small exhale, fingers brushing the frost from Rachel's jacket, noticing the slight pulse of life that had seemed uncertain minutes before. Atlas lowered his head toward Lily, nudging her gently with his nose, eliciting the tiniest shift of the blanket and a faint, almost imperceptible sigh of comfort. Isaiah looked down at the dog and murmured, "You brought them here, boy." "Thank you." Atlas responded with a low whine, barely audible over the wind, yet imbued with the sense of purpose and fulfillment, a silent acknowledgement that the task was complete. Isaiah surveyed the scene, taking in the alignment of his team, the placement of the stretchers, the flicker of warm light against snow, and the calm yet determined posture of Atlas beside him. The storm's edge still raged beyond the perimeter, but here, in this illuminated circle, there was warmth, safety, and quiet gratitude, the culmination of hours spent navigating treacherous terrain, trusting instincts, and following a white-coated guide who had carried them through uncertainty into assurance. The small movements of Lily and Rachel, the careful monitoring by Emily, and the steady presence of Mason and Noah all converged into a shared rhythm of relief and cautious celebration. Atlas, Having fulfilled his role with unwavering focus, settled briefly at Isaiah's side, legs folded beneath him, head lifted just enough to watch over those he had led through the night. Isaiah allowed himself a moment to breathe fully, feeling the storm's weight lift slightly from his shoulders, sensing the invisible thread connecting all of them: the child, the mother, the team, and the dog that had guided them with intuition beyond explanation, anchoring each in the certainty that life had been preserved, at least for now, against impossible odds. The air was still sharp, but softer now, carrying faint scents of pine, heated blankets, and snow warmed slightly by human presence. Atlas remained alert, ears flicking at every sound, ready to guide or intervene again if necessary, but the hardest part had passed. Isaiah crouched briefly to glance at the dog's amber eyes, and in them he saw not only loyalty and determination, but a quiet sense of completion, a recognition that their journey through the blizzard had reached a moment of stillness, where the miracle of survival could finally be acknowledged, and the team could take the first real steps toward warmth, safety, and reassurance for those in their care. Inside the medical station, warmth arrived slowly, not as a sudden comfort, but as a careful mercy. The room smelled of heated canvas, antiseptic, wet wool, and the faint metallic scent of gear thawing near the entrance. Snow melted from the Marine's sleeves and fell in quiet drops onto the rubber floor mats. Rachel Harper lay beneath two thermal blankets with a medic checking her temperature and speaking to her in a low, steady voice. Lily rested on a cot beside her, small beneath the silver covering, an oxygen line near her face, her breathing light but present, each rise of her chest drawing every eye in the room back toward hope. Isaiah Brooks stood near the door for a moment, still wearing the storm on his shoulders. He had led missions before. He had watched teams return from hard terrain, bruised by cold, silence, and fear. But this felt different. This did not feel like a rescue ending. It felt like something unfinished had followed them inside. Atlas stood beside him for as long as his body allowed. The white K9 kept his head lifted, watching Lily, watching Rachel, watching every hand that moved near them. Then his legs weakened. Not dramatically, not all at once. He simply lowered himself to the floor, as if the strength that had carried him through miles of snow had finally been given permission to leave. Emily Carter saw it first. She crossed the room quickly and knelt beside him, pressing her gloved hand gently to his chest. "Easy, Atlas," she said. "You did enough." The dog blinked at her, tired amber eyes softening, but even then he tried to lift his head toward Lily. Isaiah crouched beside him, the cold in his knees meeting the warmth of the station floor. "She is safe," he whispered. "Rachel is safe. You can rest now." Atlas gave a small breath through his nose, but did not fully settle until Lily's fingers shifted under the blanket. The child's hand moved toward the edge of the cot, weak and searching. Isaiah noticed and gently guided her fingers down until they brushed the fur along Atlas's neck. The dog closed his eyes. For a few seconds, nobody spoke. The generator hummed. Wind pressed against the canvas walls. Somewhere outside, a vehicle engine turned over and faded. Again, Emily began cutting away the torn strip of tactical webbing from Atlas's collar so she could examine the skin beneath and clean away the ice that had hardened there. "This collar is old," she murmured. "Military grade, but not one of ours." Mason Reed, standing behind Isaiah with his hands wrapped around a paper cup of coffee he had forgotten to drink, leaned closer. There was a tag on it earlier. Could barely read anything. Emily worked carefully, warming the metal between her palms before wiping frost from its surface with a cloth. The tag was bent, scratched, and darkened from weather, but under the light it began to surrender its truth one letter at a time. Isaiah watched without breathing. At first there was only the word Atlas. Then, beneath it, Search and Rescue K9. Then the final line emerged from beneath a ridge of melted ice. Handler, Sergeant Caleb Warren. Mason read it silently, and all color seemed to leave his face. Noah Hayes lowered his eyes. Emily stopped moving. Isaiah took the tag from her with both hands, as if it might break under the weight of memory. Caleb's name lay there in plain black letters, small and ordinary, and somehow heavier than the whole mountain. For 3 years Isaiah had carried a question no report could answer. Why had Caleb said to trust something white in the storm? Why had his last words sounded less like fear and more like instruction? Now the answer rested against the neck of a dog who had crossed through freezing darkness because his handler's final command still lived inside him. Rachel stirred from the cot, her eyes opening just enough to find Isaiah. Her voice came faint, but clearer now. He told me his friend would understand. Isaiah turned toward her. Who did? Rachel swallowed, fighting exhaustion. Sergeant Warren. He kept saying, "Tell Isaiah I did not waste it. Tell him the dog knows the way." The room seemed to tilt, not from shock, but from grace arriving too quietly to defend against. Isaiah looked down at Atlas, at the thawing ice in the white fur, at the paws that had left a trail through the storm, at the collar that had carried Caleb's name through months of silence. He had spent years thinking he failed to bring his friend home. But maybe some part of Caleb had been walking toward him the whole time, not in a body, not in a voice, but in a promise wrapped in fur and frost. Lily's eyes opened a little, clouded with sleep and medicine, but alive. She looked at Atlas and whispered, "He found us." Isaiah held the tag in his palm until the metal warmed against his skin. Then he bowed his head, not because someone told him to pray, and not because the pain was gone, but because for the first time in 3 years, the silence answered back. Atlas breathed softly at his feet, finally resting, while outside the storm continued to fall against the walls, no longer sounding like something lost, but like something being washed clean. A week later, the storm was gone, but its silence remained in the places it had touched. Snow still covered the Adirondack ridges in clean white folds, softening the road, the fence line, the roofs of the barracks, and the pine branches that had bent beneath the weight of that long night. The sky over the outpost had cleared to a pale winter blue, and morning sunlight spread across the training grounds with the quiet patience of forgiveness. Inside the medical station, the cots had been folded away. The wet gear had dried. The radio had stopped crackling with emergency calls. Rachel Harper and Lily had been transferred to a civilian hospital 40 miles south, both stable, both alive, both carrying a story the doctors could measure in body temperature and oxygen levels, but never fully explain. Atlas remained at the outpost under Emily Carter's care, sleeping more than he woke, his paws wrapped, his white coat brushed clean of ice and mud. For the first 2 days, he would not let Isaiah Brooks out of sight. If Isaiah stepped outside for coffee, Atlas lifted his head. If Isaiah crossed the room to sign a report, Atlas followed with his eyes. If another Marine came too close to Lily's empty cot, Atlas watched with the same solemn attention he had shown in the storm. It was not suspicion. It was duty looking for something to guard. On the 7th morning, Isaiah found him lying near the heater, Caleb Warren's old tag resting. Beside a new one Emily had polished and tied carefully back onto his collar. Atlas, Search and Rescue K9. Handler, Sergeant Caleb Warren. Isaiah read the words again, though he already knew them by heart. Mason Reed stood in the doorway holding 2 cups of coffee, steam rising from the lids. He did not say anything at first. He had learned that some rooms carried their own language. Finally, he set 1 cup beside Isaiah and looked down at Atlas. Command called, Mason said. They confirmed the old records. Caleb filed a temporary K9 attachment 3 months before his last mission. Search and rescue transfer out of Vermont. The dog went missing after an avalanche response. They assumed he did not make it. Isaiah ran a hand along Atlas's neck, feeling the steady warmth beneath the fur. Caleb did not assume that. Mason shook his head. No, guess he knew better. The words settled gently. Outside, a truck rolled past, tires crunching overpacked snow. Somewhere on the far side of the compound, young Marines laughed at something small and ordinary, the sound floating through the morning like life returning to its usual shape. Isaiah had spent years waiting for grief to end, only to learn that grief did not leave. It changed rooms. It changed coats. It found new ways to stand beside you without knocking you down. That afternoon, a civilian vehicle pulled through the gate. Rachel Harper stepped out first, moving carefully, wrapped in a long gray coat. Then Lily climbed down from the passenger side, bundled in a pink winter jacket, a knit hat pulled low over her ears, one hand gripping a folded white scarf. She looked smaller in daylight than she had in the storm, but stronger too, her cheeks warmed by cold air and recovery. Isaiah met them outside the medical station. He did not salute. He only nodded with the kind of respect that belongs to survivors. Rachel's eyes filled before she spoke. I wanted her to see him while she remembered. Isaiah opened the door. Atlas was awake before Lily crossed the threshold. His ears lifted. His tail moved once, then again, slow and careful. Lily stopped a few feet away, suddenly shy. The room seemed to hold its breath. Then she stepped forward and knelt beside him, placing the white scarf gently over his shoulders. "Mom made it," she whispered. "So you will not be cold anymore." Atlas pressed his nose into her sleeve. Lily wrapped both arms around his neck, not tightly, just enough for him to feel that the life he had carried back through the storm was real. Rachel covered her mouth with one hand. Mason looked out the window. Emily pretended to adjust medical supplies that did not need adjusting. Isaiah stood still, Caleb's dog tag warm in his palm, and felt something inside him loosen after 3 long years. Later, when Rachel and Lily left, Isaiah walked Atlas outside. The sun was lowering behind the pines, turning the snow gold at the edges. Atlas moved slowly, but his steps were steadier now. They stopped near the gate where he had first appeared out of the white dark. For a long moment, both of them looked toward the mountain road. Isaiah took Caleb's old tag from his pocket and fastened it beside Atlas's new one, letting the 2 pieces of metal rest together. They made a soft sound in the winter air, no louder than a whisper. "You brought him back to me," Isaiah said. Atlas leaned against his leg. Not as a soldier, not as a hero, just as a tired dog who had done what love asked of him. Isaiah looked over the quiet snowfield, where the storm had erased every footprint from that night, and understood that proof was not always something the world could see. Sometimes proof was a child breathing, a mother standing, a name returning, a white dog resting his head against your knee when your heart finally remembered how to be still. Some miracles do not arrive with thunder. Some come limping through the snow, silent and faithful, carrying a promise no storm can bury.